Ever had one of those days where criticism hits you like a brick? Maybe it was a harsh comment from a coworker, a dismissive remark from a friend, or even your own inner voice tearing you down. That sting, it's universal. We've all been there, left replaying those words in our heads, feeling smaller with each repetition. But what if I told you there's a way to not just endure criticism, but to wield it like a tool, shaping yourself into someone stronger, wiser, and unshakable? That's the power of Stoicism. 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, faced relentless scrutiny, yet he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the key. Criticism only hurts if we let it. And today, we're going to explore how Stoicism turns those painful moments into stepping stones for growth. Think about the last time criticism knocked you off balance. Your heart raced, your cheeks burned, it felt personal, right? Here's the Stoic perspective. What if that discomfort isn't a wound, but a signal? A signpost pointing you toward areas where you can evolve. The Stoics didn't just tolerate criticism, they welcomed it to them. Every harsh word was a chance to practice resilience, to separate ego from improvement, and to focus only on what they could control, their response. Imagine living like that, where no insult, no judgment, no offhand remark could derail your peace. That's not just resilience, it's liberation. This video isn't about shrugging off criticism or pretending it doesn't hurt. It's about something far more profound, rewiring how you see it. We'll dive into Stoic practices that transform criticism from a source of pain into fuel for growth. You'll learn how to dissect feedback without emotion, extract the truth from the noise, and walk away stronger every time. Because here's the truth: criticism doesn't define you, but how you handle it, that reveals everything. So if you're ready to turn judgment into your greatest teacher, let's begin. What if criticism isn't about you at all, but about the person delivering it? That's the first Stoic shift in perspective, understanding that words only have the power we give them. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, put it bluntly: it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Think about that for a second. Criticism, like all external events, is indifferent by itself. It's not inherently good or bad, it's just information. What makes it sting is our judgment, the story we attach to it. Someone calls you lazy at work. That's their opinion, shaped by their biases, their mood, maybe even their own insecurities. The Stoics would ask, does their words change who you are? No, only your reaction does. This is where the dichotomy of control comes in. Some things are up to us: our effort, our attitude, our willingness to learn. Other things, like what people say, how they judge us, whether they approve or not. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The tighter you grip, the more slips through your fingers. Criticism works the same way. Cling to it, and it drains your energy. Hold it lightly, examine it, and you might find a grain of truth worth keeping. Let's bring this into the real world. Picture a coworker who constantly nitpicks your projects. A Stoic wouldn't waste time resenting them or questioning their motives. Instead, they'd ask, is there something here I can use? Maybe the feedback is harsh, but does it highlight a blind spot? Even if the delivery is unfair, the content might still help you grow. This isn't about swallowing every critique whole. It's about sifting through the noise with cool detachment, like an archaeologist brushing dust off a relic. Some dust is just dirt, but sometimes underneath there's something valuable. The modern world bombards us with opinions, social media comments, performance reviews, offhand remarks from strangers. Stoicism trains us to stand in that storm without being knocked down. When criticism comes, pause, ask yourself, Is this within my control? If not, let it pass like weather. If it is, act without ego, without defensiveness. That's how you turn judgment into a mirror, not a weapon. And that mirror doesn't reflect your worth, it shows only where you might polish your craft. Your ego is the amplifier of criticism's sting, the invisible hand that turns a casual remark into a personal attack. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, saw this clearly. He wrote letters advising his friends to mentally rehearse insults before they happened, not out of pessimism, but to disarm the ego's reflex to flare up. Imagine walking into a room knowing someone might mock your ideas. If you've already pictured it, their words lose the power to shock you. That's the Stoic secret. Preparation shrinks the ego's grip. History gives us a masterclass in this. When the philosopher Diogenes was ridiculed in public, he didn't lash out or slink away. He stood there, utterly unshaken, as if the insults were raindrops sliding off a stone. Someone once threw a bone at him, mocking his simple lifestyle. Diogenes just picked it up and pretended it was a gift, saying, "How generous now I have a spoon." His calm wasn't indifference, it was a deliberate choice to refuse ego the spotlight. He understood that ridicule only stings when we agree it matters. Now think back to a time criticism rattled you. Was it the words themselves or the story your ego attached to them? Maybe a boss questioned your competence and your mind spun it into, "They think I'm worthless." That's ego hijacking reality. The Stoic approach: strip the story away. Ask, is there truth here? If yes, learn. If no, let it go. Your worth isn't negotiable by outside opinions. Here's a practice. Next time criticism lands, pause. Notice the heat in your chest, the urge to defend or retreat. That's your ego reacting. Then channel Diogenes. Picture handing that person a metaphorical spoon, acknowledging their words without letting them dictate your peace. Over time, this shifts criticism from a threat to a curiosity. You'll start hearing feedback not as a verdict but as data. Some data is useful, some is just noise, and your ego, it stops being the loudest voice in the room. Here's where Stoicism takes a radical turn. What if you could not just tolerate criticism, but genuinely appreciate it? Nietzsche called this Amor Fati, the love of fate. It's the art of embracing everything life throws at you, even the harsh words, as if you'd chosen them yourself. Imagine standing face to face with your critic and thinking, "Thank you for this gift." Sounds impossible. That's the Stoic challenge, to see every piece of feedback, even the brutal kind, as a hidden opportunity. Most of us react to criticism like it's an attack, arms up, defenses ready. But Stoics approach it like scientists dissecting a specimen. No emotion, just curiosity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way." That critic who nitpicks your work. They're the obstacle, the way forward, using their words to sharpen your skills. Take the Roman general Cato, who deliberately wore wrinkled robes to the Senate just to endure the jeers of his peers. Why? To practice indifference. He wasn't masochistic. He was training his mind to find value in discomfort. Try this. Grab a journal and write down one way a critic, even an unfair one, helped you grow. Maybe their harsh tone forced you to communicate more clearly, or their skepticism pushed you to prepare better. The exercise isn't about excusing rudeness, it's about reclaiming power. When you reframe criticism as fuel, you stop fearing it and start mining it. Think of criticism like a bitter herb. On its own, it's unpalatable, but mixed into the recipe of your growth. It adds depth. The next time someone critiques you, pause. Instead of recoiling, ask, what's the kernel of truth here? Even if it's buried under anger or envy, dig for it. That's Amor Fati in action, loving your fate, critics included, because they're all part of your evolution. The Stoics didn't wait for comfortable lessons. They sought out the sandpaper people, the ones who rubbed them raw, knowing friction polishes the stone. What if you could take the teeth out of criticism before it even happens? That's the power of Premeditatio Malorum, the Stoic practice of anticipating challenges, so they lose their power to shock you. Picture this, a musician about to release a new song. They know the internet can be brutal, some will love it, others will tear it apart. Instead of dreading the hate, they rehearse it in their mind. What if someone calls it boring? What if they mock the lyrics by imagining the worst-case scenarios? They're not being pessimistic, they're vaccinating themselves against disappointment. When the criticism actually comes, it feels familiar, almost expected, and that's the point. The Stoics didn't wait for storms to learn how to sail. They practiced sinking in their minds so real waves couldn't capsize them. Seneca wrote, "He robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming beforehand." Think of it like fire drills. We don't run them because we expect a fire. We run them so panic doesn't paralyze us if one happens. Criticism works the same way. Premeditation turns the unknown into the predictable, and what's predictable loses its edge. Here's how to apply this today before sharing your work, whether it's a presentation, a creative project, or even an opinion pause. Ask yourself, what's the harshest feedback I might receive? Play it out in vivid detail. Hear the words, feel the initial sting, then script your response in advance. Not with defensiveness, but with calm detachment. Maybe it's, "Thanks for the perspective, I'll consider that," or simply, "Interesting take." By rehearsing, you're not avoiding criticism, you're disarming it. Take the modern content creator bombarded with comments like, "This is lazy work," or "You've lost your touch." Without premeditation, those words might spiral into self-doubt. With it, they're just part of the script. The creator can shrug and think, right on cue. That's the magic. When you expect criticism, you control the narrative. It becomes background noise, not a detour. This isn't about assuming the worst in people. It's about refusing to let their words hijack your peace. The next time you step into a situation where judgment might come, pregame it. Visualize the critiques, sit with the discomfort, then watch as real-life criticism rolls off you like water off wax. Because here's the truth, anticipation doesn't attract negativity, it neutralizes it. And that's how you turn fear of judgment into unshakable confidence. Critics hold up a mirror we often avoid looking into, one that reflects our blind spots with brutal honesty. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly, "If anyone can show me what I'm doing wrong, I'll gladly change, for I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." That's the Stoic mindset. Criticism isn't an enemy but an ally, revealing gaps we might have missed. Imagine a sculptor working on a statue. From their angle, everything looks smooth, but someone standing across the room spots a rough edge. The sculptor has two choices: dismiss the observer or step back and see what they see. That's the power of critics. They offer perspectives we can't see ourselves. Take the story of a tech CEO whose company was bleeding money on a flagship product. Employees whispered it was doomed, but he dismissed their concerns as pessimism. Then, a junior developer bluntly said, "We're solving a problem no one has." That stung, but it also woke him up. He shelved the project, pivoted to a real market need, and within a year, the company turned profitable. That critique wasn't just noise, it was a lifeline. The CEO later admitted, "I hated hearing it, but that feedback saved us." This is where Stoicism flips the script. Instead of asking, "Why are they attacking me?" you ask, "What can I learn here?" Even unfair criticism holds clues. Maybe the delivery was hostile, but buried in the anger is a truth you've avoided. A writer once told me, "Your drafts are messy, you overwrite." My ego bristled, but later I saw it. I was hiding weak ideas under pretty sentences. That harsh note became my editing compass. So here's a challenge. Think of one critique you initially resisted but now value. Maybe a teacher said your work was rushed, or a friend pointed out a habit you couldn't see. Sit with that memory, the discomfort you felt then. That's the friction of growth. The Stoics taught that the most painful mirrors show us our sharpest edges, the ones worth polishing. Your critics aren't always right, but they're always useful, even if it's just to practice keeping your peace. Resilience isn't about bouncing back, it's about bending without breaking, like a tree rooted so deep no storm can topple it. The Stoics didn't just preach this idea, they built it into daily life through practices like negative visualization, where they'd mentally rehearse worst-case scenarios to strip fear of its power. Imagine a boxer stepping into the ring. If they've already visualized losing, the sting of defeat loses its edge. That's the paradox. By embracing the possibility of failure, they become unbreakable. Epictetus, who endured slavery and exile, put it bluntly, difficulty shows what men are. In other words, adversity doesn't weaken you, it reveals the strength you've cultivated. Now contrast two reactions to criticism. Fragile responses crumble. A single harsh comment derails confidence, leaving self-doubt in its wake. Anti-fragile responses, they thrive on pressure. Think of a musician who reads a scathing review and thinks, what can I learn from this? They don't just withstand the blow, they use it to refine their art. The Stoics called this Amor Fati, loving whatever happens, because even the harshest feedback is raw material for growth. Take the story of tennis legend Roger Federer. Early in his career, critics called him inconsistent, his backhand weak. A fragile player might have spiraled into self-pity, but Federer treated those critiques like a coach's playbook. He drilled his backhand relentlessly, transforming it into one of the most feared shots in tennis. Later, he'd say, the critics were right, and that's why I improved. That's Stoic resilience in action, not avoiding criticism but metabolizing it into strength. Here's how to build your own emotional armor. Start small. Next time someone critiques your work, pause before reacting. Ask, is this feedback true? If so, how can I use it? If not, why does it bother me? That space between stimulus and response is where Stoicism lives. It's where you choose whether to be fragile, robust, or anti-fragile, because resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you forge, one intentional reaction at a time. The Stoics knew life will hand you stones. You decide whether they trip you or become the foundation for something unshakable. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with rocks labeled, "What they think of me." Heavy, right? That's the weight of external validation, something the Stoics warned against 2,000 years ago. Seneca wrote entire letters on the folly of gossip, calling it the noise of others' tongues that drowns out our own truth. He'd tell his friend Lucilius, "Why should I care about the chatter of those whose opinions I wouldn't seek in the first place?" That's the core of Stoic detachment, realizing most opinions are just background static, not a verdict on your worth. Now, fast forward to today. We've swapped town squares for timelines, but the trap remains the same. Social media likes, comments, follower counts, they're modern-day versions of ancient gossip, masquerading as validation. Think about it. When you post something online, do you feel a pang of disappointment if it doesn't get enough hearts? That's your brain mistaking algorithmic randomness for personal rejection. Seneca would scoff at the idea of letting a thumbs-up icon dictate your self-esteem. Here's the litmus test: whose opinion truly matters to you and why. Not the vague, everyone, but the specific people whose judgment aligns with your values. A mentor's feedback might sting, but it's rooted in growth. A stranger's snark, that's just noise. The Stoics drew a clear line: respect wisdom, dismiss whims. Take the story of a novelist who obsessed over Goodreads reviews until one day she noticed a pattern. The same scene one reader called brilliant, another dubbed unreadable. Her realization: you can't please everyone, and trying to is a recipe for creative paralysis. She started writing for just two people, herself and her ideal reader. The rest she imagined tossing their opinions into Seneca's proverbial chatter bin. This isn't about arrogance or ignoring feedback. It's about discernment. Picture your mind as a fortress, the gatekeeper. Your values decides who gets in. Useful critique, welcome. Petty judgment, left at the moat. The Stoics didn't silence critics. They just stopped giving them keys to their inner peace. So next time you feel that tug of, do they like me? Pause. Ask, does this person's opinion help me grow? If not, thank them silently for the reminder, not of your flaws, but of your freedom to choose what sticks. Because validation is like salt. A little enhances the meal, too much, and you can't taste anything else. A rejection letter lands in your inbox, your manuscript, the one you poured months into, deemed not the right fit. The immediate reaction, defeat, maybe even anger, but the Stoic sees something else entirely, an invitation. Marcus Aurelius called it, the obstacle is the way. The idea that every roadblock contains the blueprint for your next step forward. That rejection isn't a full stop. It's a detour sign pointing you toward refinement. Take the novelist who received 30 rejections before her debut finally found a home. Instead of crumpling under the weight of no, she dissected each critique like a scientist. One editor called her pacing sluggish. She studied thriller structures, tightening her scenes. Another said her characters felt flat. She spent weeks observing strangers in cafes, jotting down mannerisms. By the time her book hit shelves, it wasn't just accepted. It was sharper, richer, more alive. The rejections didn't break her. They rebuilt her craft. That's the alchemy of Stoicism, turning leaden criticism into golden growth. This mindset isn't about blind optimism. It's about ruthless pragmatism. When a Stoic faces criticism, they ask three questions. What's true here? What can I control? How does this help me move forward? Imagine a chef whose signature dish gets panned by a food critic. The easy response is dismissal. They just don't get my style. The Stoic response, taste the dish again. Is the seasoning off? Is the texture muddy? Even if the critique was overly harsh, there's always a nugget of truth to mine. Here's your challenge. Pick one piece of recent criticism, big or small, and reframe it as fuel. Maybe your partner said you've been distracted lately. Instead of defensiveness, ask, is there a habit I can adjust? Or perhaps a client called your proposal unclear. Rather than resenting their bluntness, revise it with fresh eyes. Criticism to a Stoic is like a whetstone. The friction feels rough, but it's what puts the edge on your blade. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action." That's the paradox. The very thing that seems to block your path becomes the stepping stone once you shift your gaze. So the next time criticism stings, pause. Don't just endure it, interrogate it. Like a sculptor staring at a block of marble, see the unformed potential hidden within the rough edges. The obstacle isn't in your way, it is the way. There's a moment between criticism and reaction, a sliver of silence where most of us falter. We jump to defend, explain, or retaliate, turning what could be a conversation into a clash. This is where Stoicism offers a simple but radical tool, the pause. Epictetus described it as keeping the door of the mind open but the mouth shut. Imagine your ears as gates, letting words in fully before your tongue even considers responding. That pause isn't passivity, It's power in disguise. Picture this: your boss calls you into their office and says, "This report missed the mark." Your stomach drops, instinct wants to blurt out, "But I worked all night on this." The Stoic alternative: breathe, let the words land, ask, "Can you tell me more about what didn't work?" That shift from defense to curiosity changes everything. Suddenly, the critique isn't an attack, it's data. The ancient Stoics trained for this like athletes, rehearsing calm responses to insults until composure became second nature. They knew reactions are reflexes, but pauses are choices. Think back to a time when your instant reaction made things worse. Maybe a partner said, "You never listen," and you snapped, "That's not true." Escalating tension instead of solving anything. Now, reimagine that moment with a Stoic pause. The words hang in the air. You notice your pulse rising, but you don't let it dictate your reply. Instead, you say, "Help me understand what you're feeling unheard about." The entire dynamic shifts from combat to collaboration. Here's how to practice this today. Next time criticism comes, physically still yourself. Count to 3 silently. In that pause, ask what part of this might be true. Even if the delivery is harsh, the content might hold value. A colleague once told me, "Your meetings waste time." My knee-jerk reaction was anger until I paused and realized half the room was checking their phones. The critique wasn't elegant, but it wasn't wrong. That's the Stoic superpower, hearing the signal through the noise. Epictetus said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listening fully before speaking isn't just polite, it's strategic. It turns critics into unwitting mentors and every piece of feedback into a chance to refine your craft. The next time words sting, don't reach for a shield. Reach for silence, let the pause do the heavy lifting. Imagine your boss storms into your office and snaps, "You're lazy." Your face flushes, your stomach knots. It feels like a verdict on your character. But here's what a Stoic hears: not a truth, but an interpretation. The fact the report was late, the judgment that you're lazy. The Stoics called this the Discipline of Assent, the practice of separating objective reality from the stories we layer onto it. Epictetus drilled this into his students. Don't let the force of an impression sweep you off your feet. Say to it, "Hold on, let me see who you are and what you represent." That pause is where wisdom begins. Take that workplace example. "You're lazy" is an emotion-laden label. "The report was late" is a verifiable event. One attacks your identity, the other describes an outcome. The Stoic doesn't deny the tardiness, they examine it. Was the deadline unrealistic? Did other priorities intervene? Or was it truly a lapse in effort? By stripping away the judgment, you're left with actionable data. Marcus Aurelius journaled daily to practice this very skill, writing, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." Here's how to apply this today. Grab a notebook and draw 2 columns. Label 1, facts, the other, interpretations. Next time criticism stings, dissect it. If a friend says, "You're selfish," the fact might be, "I declined their last 3 invites." Now you can explore, are you truly selfish or were you swamped with work? Is this a pattern or a temporary phase? The goal isn't to dodge accountability. It's to respond to what's real, not to someone's frustration. Consider a chef whose customer complains, "This soup tastes terrible." The amateur takes it personally. The Stoic chef asks, "Is it oversalted, underseasoned, or did the customer simply prefer a different flavor profile?" Judgment shuts down growth. Facts open the door to improvement. That's the power of discernment. It turns criticism from a grenade into a GPS, pointing you toward better versions of yourself without blowing up your confidence. Your turn. Pick one recent critique and journal the facts beneath it. Not they think I'm incompetent, but they noted two errors in my presentation. See how the weight shifts? That's Stoicism in action, not avoiding hard truths, but refusing to let them define you. Criticism doesn't just reveal gaps in your work, it exposes the cracks in your character. The Stoics saw every harsh word as a test, a chance to prove what kind of person you're choosing to become. Take Cato the Younger, who walked through Rome's streets dressed in outdated robes, deliberately inviting ridicule. When passers-by jeered, he didn't flinch or retaliate. His calm wasn't weakness, it was ironclad self-mastery. To him, their laughter wasn't humiliation, it was resistance training for his integrity. Every insult became a weight to lift his virtue higher. Fast forward to modern boardrooms where one CEO faced a shareholder revolt during an earnings call. Investors hurled accusations of incompetence, their voices dripping with contempt. Instead of firing back or crumbling, she leaned in. "Tell me more about your concerns," she said, her tone steady. By the meeting's end, even her harshest critic admitted, "I don't agree with her strategy, but I respect how she handled this." That's the Stoic ideal in action, transforming hostility into a showcase for grace. Here's the reframe: criticism isn't about what they say, but how you choose to stand in the storm. Picture your best self, the version of you grounded in wisdom, patience, and unshakable worth. Now ask, how would that person respond to this moment? Maybe they'd listen without interrupting. Maybe they'd nod and say, "I'll reflect on that." Or maybe they'd simply smile, knowing their value isn't up for debate. That's the test. Will you let someone else's words dictate your dignity, or will you hand them back their anger like an unopened package? Consider a teacher whose student screamed, "You're the worst." After failing a test, she could have punished the outburst. Instead, she replied, "I hear how upset you are. Let's talk when you're ready." Days later, the student apologized, admitting they'd been scared about college. The insult wasn't really about her, it was a cry for help disguised as an attack. Stoicism teaches us to look past the surface of criticism to the humanity beneath. Every harsh word is a fork in the road. One path leads to reaction, ego's knee-jerk defense. The other leads to response, the deliberate choice of your highest self. The next time criticism bites, pause. See it not as an assault, but as a pop quiz on your growth. The grade isn't based on their words, but on what you do with them. Silence can be the loudest rebuttal. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly, but I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own." That last line holds the key when we recognize that harsh words often say more about the speaker than the target. Silence becomes not weakness, but sovereignty over your peace. Think of it like this: when a child throws a tantrum, reacting only fuels the fire. But when met with calm silence, the storm burns itself out. Modern culture glorifies the clapback, the witty, cutting reply that wins the exchange. But the Stoics measured victory differently. To them, winning meant refusing to play the game at all. Take the actor who faced relentless tabloid rumors about their personal life. Reporters baited them for reactions at every red carpet, hungry for a headline. Their response, smiling, waving, and saying nothing. Over time, the gossip died out, not because it was disproven, but because silence starved it of oxygen. Meanwhile, another celebrity engaged in public feuds with critics, each rebuttal spawning 10 new articles. The Stoics would nod at the first approach. You own what you react to. This isn't about suppressing anger or swallowing injustice. It's about strategic disengagement. Imagine two chess players. One frantically counters every move, the other lets their opponent waste energy attacking empty squares. Silence, in this light, isn't passive, it's a deliberate gambit. Epictetus put it bluntly: if someone speaks badly of you and it's true, correct yourself. If it's a lie, laugh at it. Laughter here isn't literal, it's the inner shrug of someone who knows their worth isn't up for debate. Consider the last time you felt compelled to defend yourself against unfair criticism. Maybe a relative made a snide comment about your career, or an online stranger mocked your opinion. Recall the energy drained in crafting the perfect retort, the hours spent replaying the exchange. Now imagine letting those words pass like a train you didn't board. That's the power of Stoic silence. It reclaims your time, focus, and emotional reserves for what truly matters. There's profound strength in asking, does this deserve my attention? Most criticism fails the test. The next time words try to hook you, remember Marcus's warning. The more we value things outside our control, the less control we have. Your silence isn't surrender, it's the ultimate veto. Gratitude for critics might sound like a paradox until you realize the Stoics saw every critic as an unpaid teacher. Seneca wrote, "The wise person can find a lesson in every enemy." Think about that. Someone hurls an insult, and instead of dodging it, you catch it, turn it over, and ask, what's the lesson here? That's not just resilience, it's alchemy. Transforming bitterness into wisdom is the ultimate Stoic flex. Consider the mentor who once told you, "This isn't good enough." At the time, it stung, but later you realized their bluntness pushed you to raise your standards. That's the hidden curriculum of criticism, the parts we only understand in hindsight. The ancient Stoics practiced gratitude for these harsh instructors, not because they enjoyed the pain, but because they recognized its role in growth. Like a blacksmith's hammer, criticism shapes us, but only if we stay on the anvil instead of jumping off at the first strike. Here's a modern twist. A startup founder I know keeps a "thank you critics" file. Every time someone tears apart their idea, they jot down the feedback and revisit it months later. Half the time, they realize the critique was dead on, they just weren't ready to hear it. The other half, it becomes a reminder of how far they've come. That's Stoic gratitude in action, treating criticism like a time capsule, knowing its value might not be immediate, but it's inevitable. Try this today. Pull out your phone and text someone whose tough feedback once hurt but later helped you. No caveats, no defensiveness, just, "Hey, I was thinking about when you said." It stung then, but it made me better, thank you. Watch what happens. Not only does it disarm old tensions, but it rewires your brain to see critics as collaborators in your growth. Seneca called enemies the best teachers because they show us our weaknesses without mercy. So why resent them? Thank them. They're doing the hard work of polishing your rough edges for free. Criticism is the sandpaper that smooths your craft, and gratitude, that's the hand that chooses to keep sanding. Epictetus gave us the ultimate tool for handling criticism, a three-question filter that separates the useful from the noise. First, ask, is this true? Not, does it hurt? Or, do I like hearing it? But is there factual accuracy here? Imagine scrolling through hate comments on a viral tweet. One says, "You clearly didn't research this topic." That stings, but before reacting, interrogate it. Did you cut corners, miss key studies? If the answer's yes, that's not an insult. It's a free audit of your blind spots. If no, you've just identified empty noise. Next, is it useful? Truth alone isn't enough. Some facts are irrelevant. A critic might snipe. Your video's background is ugly. Maybe it is, but unless you're a set designer, that's not actionable feedback. Compare that to, your explanation skipped a crucial step. That's gold. The Stoics called this process the discipline of attention. every piece of criticism is an apple in a barrel. Most are fine, but a few are rotten. Your job isn't to eat them all, it's to sort them. Finally, the Stoic litmus test. Is it within my control? Epictetus hammered this home. What upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. A comment like, "Nobody should take you seriously," says more about the speaker's mood than your worth. You can't control their bitterness, but you can control whether you internalize it. The moment you recognize a critique is about their baggage, not your actions, it loses its power to derail you. Now, apply this to those viral tweet replies. "You're an idiot" fails all three questions. It's not true, just vague contempt. Not useful, no guidance. And not within your control. Their opinion isn't yours to manage. But buried in the hate might be, your source contradicts the study from Harvard. That's specific, verifiable, and fixable. Stoic fuel for growth. Here's the magic. This filter doesn't just protect you from toxic feedback, it attracts better critics. When you engage thoughtfully with those offering substance, even if their tone is rough, you signal that you're here to improve, not just perform. Over time, the noise fades and the signal gets clearer. That's how Stoics turn critics into collaborators, one filtered comment at a time. Humility is the armor no critic can pierce. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "I am a soul carrying around a corpse, a blunt reminder that we're all flawed, evolving works in progress." The moment we stop pretending to be finished masterpieces, criticism loses its power to humiliate. Think of a scientist submitting their research to peer review. They don't rage when colleagues point out gaps. They lean in, knowing every critique sharpens the truth. That's Stoic humility, the quiet confidence to say, "I haven't arrived yet, and that's okay." Consider the Nobel Prize winner who proudly displays her first rejected paper on her office wall. The comments are brutal, methodology unsound, conclusions premature. But she frames them not as failures, but as proof that brilliance isn't born, it's built through relentless refinement. The Stoics would applaud her. Epictetus taught that the wise person knows what they don't know, a humility that turns critics into unwitting mentors. When you stop defending your infallibility, you start growing. Here's the challenge. Picture your most persistent critic. Maybe it's a coworker, a family member, even your own inner voice. Now ask, what if they're right about just one thing? Not everything, not even most things, but that single grain of truth you've been dodging. Maybe it's your tendency to interrupt, your habit of cutting corners when rushed, or your avoidance of tough conversations. Humility isn't about groveling, it's about the courage to hold up a mirror and whisper, "Show me." Take the tech CEO who received anonymous feedback calling him dismissive in meetings. His first instinct, dismiss it, of course, but Stoic humility prompted him to review meeting recordings. There it was, the subtle eye rolls, the impatient interruptions. That critic wasn't attacking his character, they were handing him a roadmap to better leadership. By embracing imperfection, he turned a sting into a strategy. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire but journaled nightly about his shortcomings, not to self-flagellate, but to stay awake to growth. That's the paradox. When you stop fearing flaws, you disarm the critics who spot them. Your turn. What's one unflattering truth you've been avoiding? Not the noise, not the malice, but the quiet knock of something real asking to be let in. Humility doesn't weaken you, it frees you to fight better battles. Marcus Aurelius didn't just face criticism, he documented it. Every night by candlelight, he'd open his journal and dissect the day's stings with surgical precision. Not to dwell, but to distill. His pages weren't filled with rants or self-pity, they were training logs for the mind. Today, Senator Lucius called me weak, he might write. What's true here, that I hesitated on the tax vote, not from cowardice, but to hear more evidence. Lesson, clarity prevents misinterpretation. That's Stoic journaling, turning criticism into a dialogue with your highest self. Your own journal can be that kind of crucible, a place where harsh words lose their heat and harden into wisdom. Start with a simple format. First, record the critique verbatim. My manager said I lack attention to detail. No sugarcoating. Then, the Stoic pivot: 3 questions that change everything. What's the fact beneath the judgment? Maybe you missed 2 deadlines. What's their bias? Your manager prizes precision above all. What's my takeaway? Double-check work before submitting, but don't internalize careless as identity. This isn't about excuses, it's about extraction. Like panning for gold, you sift through the sediment to find the flecks that actually matter. Take inspiration from a modern executive who journals critiques religiously. When a client snapped, "Your proposal feels rushed," she didn't just fume, she wrote it down, then added, "Fact, I condensed 20 hours into 10. Truth, speed, compromised polish." Growth: next time, push back on unrealistic timelines or simplify scope. Months later, she reviewed those entries and realized a pattern. Her people-pleasing was the real culprit. That's the power of the practice. It reveals not just surface errors, but systemic ones. Here's your template. Divide your page into 4 columns. Criticism, facts, their lens, my growth. When your coworker mutters, "You're not a team player," fill it in. Criticism, not a team player. Facts, declined 3 lunch invites this month. Their lens, they value social bonding as much as output. My growth, schedule 1 shared meal weekly, but own that focused work time is valid. The magic isn't in the ink, it's in the intentional space between reaction and reflection. Marcus didn't journal to wallow, he journaled to wield. His meditations weren't a diary, they were a drill. Every critique a repetition, every response muscle memory for integrity. Your notebook can be the same, not where criticism festers, but where it's forged into something stronger. So tonight, before bed, open to a blank page. Not to replay the day's wounds, but to stitch them into armor. The words that hurt at noon might just heal you by moonrise. Ever notice how the same criticism can land in wildly different ways depending on who delivers it? A mentor's tough feedback might sting but leaves you motivated, while a rival's backhanded compliment, "You're so brave for wearing that," feels like a paper cut to the ego. The Stoics would tell you the difference isn't in the words, but in the motivation behind them. And here's the twist: understanding why someone criticizes can disarm the insult entirely. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When someone seems to have injured you, consider what moved them to do so." That's the Stoic inquiry, peeling back the layers of intent without getting tangled in judgment. Take that rival's backhanded compliment. On the surface, it's a jab at your style, but pause. Is it jealousy? Maybe they resent your confidence. Is it projection? Perhaps they've been mocked for their own choices. Or is it even misguided care, a clumsy attempt to help you fit in? The Stoics practiced this dissection like surgeons, not to excuse malice, but to drain its power. Epictetus put it plainly: if someone handed your body to a passerby, you'd be furious. Why hand over your mind to anyone who insults you? When you realize criticism often says more about the critic's inner world than your worth, you stop accepting every emotional package they try to deliver. History offers a masterclass in this. When the philosopher Zeno was mocked for his weathered cloak, he didn't retaliate. He observed that his critic wore expensive perfumes and fine silks. "Your need to adorn yourself," he replied, "tells me more about your insecurities than my cloak ever could." Zeno wasn't just clapping back, he was highlighting the hidden script behind criticism. The jabs we throw often reveal the armor we're missing. Here's how to practice this today. Next time criticism feels personal, ask two questions. What pain might be driving them? And what's their relationship to this topic? A boss nitpicking your presentation might be terrified of failing themselves. A friend critiquing your life choices might be projecting their own regrets. This isn't about playing therapist, it's about recognizing that hurt people. And once you see the wound behind the words, you're free to respond with clarity, not reactivity. Marcus Aurelius kept a mental habit. Whenever someone wrongs you, ask yourself what made them think this was right. That shift from "how dare they" to "what led them here" turns critics into case studies. You'll start hearing subtext in every barb. The colleague who says, "must be nice to have time for hobbies," isn't criticizing your schedule, they're mourning their own imbalance. The internet troll screaming, "you're a fraud," isn't assessing your work, they're battling their own inadequacy. This isn't about absolving cruelty. It's about wielding discernment like a shield. Some criticism is sandpaper rough but refining. Some is smoke dense but directionless. The Stoic doesn't confuse the two. They stand in the storm of words untangled because they know the wind isn't blowing at them. It's just blowing, and understanding that changes everything. Socrates didn't just tolerate criticism, he sought it out. In the crowded Athenian agora, he deliberately provoked debate, welcoming dissenting voices with open arms. "When someone contradicts me," he said, "they become my teacher." Imagine that level of confidence, not just enduring criticism, but actively courting it as a path to wisdom. Fast forward 24 centuries, and society's relationship with dissent has taken a sharp turn. Modern cancel culture often treats criticism as contamination to be quarantined, not as fertilizer for growth. The Stoics would have raised an eyebrow at this shift. For them, criticism wasn't just inevitable, it was essential, the whetstone against which character was sharpened. Consider the stark contrast between then and now. Socrates drank hemlock rather than silence his critics, while today, public figures issue PR-crafted apologies at the first sign of backlash. The ancient Stoics, figures like Cato, who wore his tattered cloak as a badge of honor amid Roman elitism, understood that dignity isn't the absence of opposition, but the manner of bearing it. Meanwhile, social media feeds brim with influencers scrubbing negative comments, celebrities blocking detractors, and corporations walking back statements at the slightest outcry. This isn't progress, it's fragility masquerading as empowerment. The Stoic alternative: stand firm in your principles while remaining open to refinement. So who carries this torch today? Think of figures like tennis legend Roger Federer, who famously thanked critics after a tough loss, saying, "They push me to be better." Or author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who responds to literary criticism with public revisions, acknowledging valid points without crumbling under pressure. Then there's astronaut Chris Hadfield, who transformed NAS, a blunt peer reviews, from ego-bruising rituals into collaborative problem-solving sessions. These modern Stoics share a common thread. They separate the substance of critique from its delivery, mining even harsh feedback for gems of improvement. Cancel culture operates on fear, the fear of being wrong, of backlash, of imperfection. Stoicism operates on curiosity. When a critic fires arrows, the Stoic doesn't hide behind a shield or shoot back. They study the arrowheads to improve their armor. The question isn't, how do I silence this person, but what can they show me about myself? That's the real test of character. Not whether you can avoid criticism, but whether you can let it polish you without breaking you. Picture two artists. One pulls their exhibit after a negative review, spiraling into self-doubt. The other hangs that review beside their canvas, using it as a compass for their next work. Both feel the sting, only one grows from it. The Stoic knows that criticism, like fire, can destroy or refine, and the difference lies not in the flame, but in what you choose to forge from the heat. Words shape worlds, especially the ones we use to describe criticism. Epictetus drilled this into his students. Don't say they attacked me. Say they offered me insights. That shift isn't wordplay, it's worldview. The moment you replace attack with feedback, you transform a battlefield into a classroom. Imagine your coworker says, "Your presentation was all over the place." Label it an attack and your body tenses, your defenses rise. Call it insight and suddenly you're scanning for patterns where transitions unclear. Did themes wander? The content hasn't changed, but your lens has. That's Stoic reframing, the art of editing your inner narrative to disarm emotional landmines. Take the word nitpicky. It carries a sneer implying pettiness, but swap it with detail-oriented, and the same behavior becomes a virtue. A manager who points out every typo isn't a tormentor, they're a precision coach. Even harsh critics often hold shards of truth. It's our language that decides whether we see them as weapons or tools. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." The harm isn't in the critique, it's in the label we slap on it. Here's a challenge: grab a recent critique, maybe "you're too sensitive" or "this isn't your best work," and rewrite it neutrally. Strip the emotional charge, leaving only the observation. "You're too sensitive" becomes "you reacted strongly to that comment." "This isn't your best work" turns into "this differs from your usual standard." Notice how the facts remain, but the sting fades. That's the Stoic superpower, editing reality not by changing events, but by upgrading your vocabulary. Consider a chef whose reviewer snipes. "The soup tastes like dishwater. Ouch, but reframed. The broth lacked depth. Now it's actionable." The first version triggers shame, the second sparks curiosity. What could amplify the umami? A longer simmer, better stock. Language doesn't just describe your experience, it designs it. The Stoics knew this centuries ago. Master your words, and you master how the world touches you. So next time criticism lands, pause. Before you react to the words, rephrase them. Turn "they're undermining me" into "they're highlighting gaps." Because the difference between a wound and a wake-up call isn't in the comment, it's in the caption you give it. Epictetus didn't say words have power. He proved they're the only power that's truly yours to wield. Ever hit send on an angry email and instantly regretted it? That split-second reaction, the one that feels justified in the heat of the moment, is exactly what Seneca warned about 2,000 years ago when he wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." The Stoics didn't just preach patience, they engineered it into a system. Enter the 24-hour rule, a deliberate pause between criticism and response, designed to let emotions settle like sediment in a glass of water. What looks murky at noon often clears by midnight. Picture this: your colleague publicly dismantles your proposal in a team meeting. Your pulse spikes, your fingers itch to fire off a defensive Slack message. Here's the Stoic intervention: walk away, open a draft, pour every fiery thought onto the page, then close it. Set a timer for 24 hours. When you return, read it aloud. You'll likely find two things. First, half the urgent points now feel trivial. Second, the remaining substance can be addressed without venom. Seneca called anger brief insanity, and this rule is the straitjacket that keeps it contained. History offers a brutal example. When Emperor Nero's tutor criticized his poetry, Nero ordered the man's execution. Hours later, he rescinded the order, but the messenger arrived too late. That fatal delay wasn't just a moral failure, it was a logistical one. The Stoics would argue Nero's real mistake wasn't his temper, It was assuming his first reaction deserved action. Modern psychology backs this ancient hack. Studies show cortisol, the stress hormone fueling knee-jerk reactions, takes about 18 to 24 hours to metabolize fully. That's not coincidence, it's biology aligning with philosophy. Think of a CEO who drafts a scathing reply to a board member's critique, then sleeps on it. By dawn, they're editing the same message to say, "Let's discuss your concerns Tuesday." The facts didn't change, the framing did. Now, reflect. What's one reaction you wish you could rewind? Maybe snapping at a partner over spilled coffee or ghosting a friend after a thoughtless comment. The sting of those moments isn't in the conflict, it's in the irreversible momentum of a reaction launched too soon. The 24-hour rule isn't about suppressing emotions, it's about giving them space to evolve from sparks into signals. Seneca's letters reveal a man who practiced what he preached. When insulted, he'd jot down retorts in private, then burn the parchment unread. "I judge myself by what I think," he wrote, "not by what others say in passion." That parchment wasn't just paper, it was a ritual transforming rage into ash. Your draft folder can serve the same purpose. The next time criticism ignites your temper, remember, silence isn't weakness. It's the interval where wisdom outlasts wrath. Criticism often feels like an arrow shot from a distance, but the Stoics remind us, the person holding the bow is human too. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journal, "When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. You'll find yourself more amused than angry." That shift from seeing critics as adversaries to recognizing them as flawed, struggling people is the essence of Stoic compassion. Picture your boss snapping at you during a high-stakes meeting. Your instinct is to resent them, but what if instead you considered the pressure they're under, the sleepless nights, the boardroom demands, the fear of failure? Suddenly, their sharp words aren't a personal attack, but a cry of stress echoing through their own battles. This isn't about excusing poor behavior. It's about understanding its roots. Epictetus, born into slavery, had every reason to despise his oppressors. Yet he taught, every person is not just acting according to their nature, but according to their judgment of what's right. That critic who tears down your ideas, they likely believe they're helping, or at least protecting themselves. A coworker's passive-aggressive email might stem from their own insecurity about being overlooked. Even internet trolls spewing venom from behind screens are often projecting pain they can't articulate. The Stoic response isn't to match their energy, but to see through it. Consider a nurse who endured constant criticism from an overworked doctor. Instead of retaliating, she noticed his trembling hands and the dark circles under his eyes. One morning, she left a coffee and note on his desk. "Rough nights deserve small mercies." The doctor's demeanor softened. Later, he apologized, admitting he'd been drowning in personal crises. That's Stoic compassion in action, disarming hostility with humanity. Marcus Aurelius called this seeing the divine spark in even the harshest critic. Not because they deserve it, but because you deserve the peace it brings you. Here's the practice. Next time someone criticizes you, pause. Before reacting, ask, how are we alike? Maybe they're afraid like you. Maybe they crave validation like you. Maybe they're doing their best with the tools they have, just like you. This isn't about being a doormat. It's about refusing to let someone else's struggles become your suffering. The ancient Stoics knew anger was a burden carried by the holder, not the target. When you choose compassion, you're not absolving them, you're freeing yourself. Think of a parent yelling at a teacher during a school meeting. The easy response is defensiveness. The Stoic response, "This isn't about me." This is a parent terrified for their child's future. That shift doesn't excuse rudeness, but it transforms how the criticism lands. Like rain on a windshield, it beads up and rolls away instead of soaking in. Seneca wrote, "To bear wrongs with calm is not submission, it's superiority." Superiority not over others, but over your own reflexes. Because when you see the humanity in your critics, you stop fighting ghosts and start seeing people. And people, no matter how harsh their words, are always more than the worst thing they've said. Epictetus had a brilliant metaphor for handling public criticism. Imagine life as a play, and yourself as an actor assigned a role. The audience might boo or cheer, but your job isn't to control their reactions. It's to deliver your lines with conviction. Now, fast forward to today's digital stage, where a single misstep can erupt into viral condemnation. A tweet taken out of context, an awkward speech clip suddenly. Thousands are dissecting your character. The Stoic approach: play your part well, regardless of the hecklers. When the philosopher was mocked in public, he didn't crumble or retaliate. He'd say, "If someone calls you a donkey, does that make you one? Then why be troubled?" That's the essence. Criticism only sticks if you accept the costume others try to dress you in. Think of a politician who stumbles during a debate. The internet floods with memes, the opposition pounces, but what if they simply own the moment? "Yes, I flubbed that line. Now let's talk about policy." That's the Stoic actor in action, acknowledging the stumble without letting it derail the performance. The modern parallel: viral call-out culture where public shaming is currency. A celebrity posts an unpopular opinion, and within hours, hashtags demand their cancellation. The Stoic question isn't, "How do I survive this?" but "What's unshakable in me?" Your values, your integrity, your commitment to growth. These are the foundation no tweet can topple. Consider the athlete who drops the game-winning pass. The stadium roars with disappointment. Social media explodes with hot takes. The fragile response. Delete accounts, issue tearful apologies. The Stoic response: study the tape, refine the craft, and return next week. Because here's the truth: crowds are fickle. Today's villain is tomorrow's hero if they stay rooted in their purpose. Marcus Aurelius faced constant scrutiny as emperor, yet he wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than others, yet care more about their opinions than our own." That's the paradox. We let strangers, whose lives we barely know, define our self-worth. So when public criticism comes, whether it's a room of jeering colleagues or a viral pile-on, ask, what role am I truly here to play? Not the flawless idol, not the crowd pleaser, but the person aligned with their deepest principles. The actor doesn't stop mid-scene to argue with the audience. They finish the play, then, if needed, refine their art. Your critics, they'll move on to the next show, but your character, that's yours to keep. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." But true bravery isn't just facing external challenges. It's the courage to define your worth by standards no critic can touch. The Stoics measured success not in applause or accolades, but in virtues like integrity, effort, and self-mastery. Imagine an artist who spends months on a painting, only to have it met with shrugs at the gallery. The fragile ego crumbles, desperate for validation. The Stoic artist, they already won by showing up daily, by wrestling with the canvas, by honoring their craft regardless of the crowd's reaction. That's the shift. When your self-worth is anchored inward, the winds of opinion can't capsize you. So how do we build this unshakable metric system for self-approval? Start with 3 Stoic validations that exist beyond external noise. First, alignment with purpose. Did you act in harmony with your deepest values today? A teacher might measure her worth not by test scores, but by the patience she showed a struggling student. Second, effort over outcome. the entrepreneur whose startup fails can still sleep soundly knowing they gave their all, a truth no investor's verdict can erase. Third, growth through friction, that uncomfortable feedback you digested without defensiveness. That's a private victory, invisible to others but transformative for you. History offers a striking example in the philosopher Zeno, who lost his entire fortune in a shipwreck. Stranded in Athens, he wandered into a bookstore, discovered Stoicism, and later founded his own school. When asked about his resilience, he didn't cite wealth or fame. He spoke of the inner compass that guided him from ruin to reinvention. Centuries later, a modern parallel plays out in athletes like NBA legend Tim Duncan, nicknamed the Big Fundamental for his relentless focus on basics over flashy plays. While others chased highlight reels, Duncan measured himself by a quieter standard. Mastery of fundamentals, the crowd's roar, just background music. Your task today, grab a notebook and answer Seneca's challenge. What progress have I made? Not in likes, promotions, or praise, but in the silent currencies of character. Did you choose courage over comfort today? Did you respond to provocation with patience? These are the metrics no one can inflate or deflate but you. The artist who values process over reviews sleeps well, win or lose, because the real masterpiece isn't on the gallery wall, it's the person holding the brush. Marcus Aurelius often stared at the night sky before making decisions not for celestial guidance, but for cosmic perspective. In the vastness of the universe, he'd remind himself, even emperors are fleeting specks. That's the Stoic long view, pulling back the lens until today's stings shrink into insignificance. Think about the last social media feud that consumed you. The notifications, the clapbacks, the racing pulse as you crafted the perfect takedown. Now fast forward a year. Can you even remember the tweet that felt like a battle for your dignity? That's the question Stoicism trains us to ask in the heat of criticism. Will this matter in 12 months? Not theoretically, but viscerally, will this comment, this slight, this momentary friction leave any trace on the person you're becoming? History offers a brutal litmus test for this. In ancient Rome, politicians dueled with speeches, not subtweets. Cicero's rivals mocked his every word, etching insults into Senate records. Yet his letters reveal a man who slept soundly, writing, "Time obliterates the trivial." The slurs meant to immortalize his shame. They're now footnotes in history books, studied by scholars who marvel not at the insults, but at Cicero's restraint. Contrast that with modern outrage cycles, where a single viral misstep can feel career-ending until next week's scandal washes it away. The Stoic knows both extremes are illusions, neither the hype nor the horror lasts. Here's the practice: when criticism lands, pause, close your eyes. Picture yourself 1 year from today, looking back at this moment. What details fade? The tone of their voice, the heat in your chest, those will dissolve. What remains? Only the lessons you chose to extract. A chef I know keeps a forgotten fires. List every scathing review that once kept him awake, now remembered only because he recorded them. Next to each entry, he writes what stung at the time and what he learned. The pattern is revealing. The pain always fades. The growth sometimes sticks. Marcus called this viewing human affairs as from a high mountain. From that vantage point, the office spat, the passive-aggressive email, the viral takedown, they're just dust swirling in the canyon below. This isn't about dismissing genuine harm, but about distinguishing wounds from scratches. The critic who calls your work amateurish today will likely forget they said it by next quarter. The question is, will you? So next time criticism hooks you, borrow the Stoic telescope. Zoom out past the emotion, past the moment, until the sharp edges blur into context. What feels like a boulder in your path now will be a pebble in your rear view. and the person who threw it just another traveler on the road already miles behind you. Morning light streams through your window before the day's battles begin. The Stoics would arm themselves with intention. Picture Marcus Aurelius rising before dawn to scribble in his journal, steeling himself for the criticism he knew would come as emperor. His morning ritual wasn't about avoiding conflict, it was about preparing to meet it with unshakable clarity. This is where your practice begins, a 5-minute mental inoculation. As you sip your coffee, flip through a stack of quote cards, Epictetus words like, "If someone tells you that so and so speaks ill of you, don't bother denying it. Just reply, they must not know my other faults, or they'd have mentioned those too." Let these words be your armor, woven into your mindset before the first email pings or the first critique lands. Evenings, however, are for dissection. Seneca called nightfall the judge of the day, a time to sift through the rubble of interactions for golden nuggets of growth. Open your journal to 2 columns, criticisms received and lessons extracted. Maybe your boss snapped about a missed deadline. Under received, you write, "Boss called me unreliable." Then pause, the Stoic pivot, lessons extracted. Next project, set interim checkpoints to avoid last-minute rushes. This isn't self-flagellation, it's alchemy. You're not dwelling on the sting, you're transmuting it into strategy. Now, the mental gymnasium. Epictetus trained his students to treat criticism like a sparring session, a way to flex resilience muscles. Try this, pin a harsh note from a critic, real or imagined, to your mirror. Each morning, read it aloud without flinching. A designer might post a client's comment. Your logo feels generic. At first, it smarts, but over weeks, something shifts. The words lose their venom, becoming mere data points. Your reflexes rewire. Where you once bristled, you now think, "How can I push my creativity further?" That's the gymnasium at work, turning barbed words into resistance training for your character. Take inspiration from a surgeon who keeps a failure scrapbook. Every critical peer review, every botched procedure note, they all go in. Before major operations, she flips through it, not to dwell on mistakes, but to greet them as old instructors. The Stoics would nod in approval. This isn't morbid, it's mastery. By normalizing criticism, you drain its power to derail you. Your tools are simple: quote cards to frame your mindset, evening journals to distill wisdom, and the mental gymnasium to harden your calm. The goal isn't to avoid getting hit, it's to learn how to take the blow, stand steady, and walk away wiser, because the critic's voice may echo, but your response, that's yours to craft. Fire tests gold, Seneca's timeless reminder that the harshest flames don't destroy, but reveal. And so it is with criticism. What once felt like an attack through the lens of Stoicism transforms into something far more valuable, the raw material for unshakable growth. Every harsh word, every skeptical glance, every piece of feedback that stung, these aren't obstacles. They're the forge where resilience is hammered into shape, where discernment separates the useful from the noise, and where gratitude turns even the bitterest critiques into unexpected teachers. Think back to the tools we've explored: discernment, that sharp blade slicing through emotion to uncover facts; resilience, the quiet strength to bend without breaking, like a reed in the wind; gratitude, the radical choice to thank critics for their unwitting gifts. These aren't just philosophical concepts, they're survival gear for a world that will inevitably test you. The coworker who nitpicks your presentation, they're your drill sergeant for precision. The stranger who leaves a scathing comment, they're your mirror for humility. Even your own inner critic, that relentless voice whispering, "Not good enough," it's not your enemy, it's your most demanding coach. Here's your challenge: pick one critique you've been carrying like a stone in your pocket. Maybe it's that performance review that still smarts, or the offhand remark from a friend that lingers. Now, re-examine it through Stoic eyes. What's the fact beneath the judgment? What's the lesson hidden in the discomfort? And most importantly, how has this critique, however painful, already made you stronger? Seneca wrote, "No tree becomes rooted and sturdy unless many winds blow against it." The winds will keep coming, that's life, but the Stoic question isn't whether you'll face criticism, it's what you'll build from it. So as you step away from this video, ask yourself, which Stoic practice will you try first? The journaling exercise to dissect feedback, the 24-hour rule to pause before reacting. Or maybe just the simple habit of whispering thank you to the next critic who crosses your path. The choice is yours, but remember, gold doesn't fear the fire. It knows what it will become.